Arizona football hosts a major visitor this past weekend. How did it go?
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats. The show is brought to you by FanDuel. Check it out, FanDuel. All right, we got a lot to get to this show. We are going to talk almost all Arizona football. We will try to get to some Arizona minutes if possible for the basketball team. I know we were remiss in that last show, but first we got to talk about the portal. Obviously, we went over yesterday kind of the position units, where everything kind of stands with this team. And just to kind of a little bit of a recap, I think the Arizona quarterback position, we're giving it an A. Running backs, we're giving a B. A little bit of lack of a depth, but two guys up there that are awesome. A at the wide receiver spot. We are going to get back on that. And then some of the question marks were obviously the offensive line, depth along the defensive line, tight end, and cornerbacks. So we will we'll get to that. And excuse me, another linebacker as well. But first, let's talk about Elijhah Badger. So Elijhah Badger was on campus this past week. Now, a little bit of a refresher on who Elijhah Badger is. Former four-star wide receiver out of California, one of ASU's best players this past year. Actually, probably ASU's best player this past year. He's very, very good. And listen, he was able to put up a lot of numbers without very good quarterback play. And by a lot of numbers, it's relative. But, 800 plus yards, 7 touchdowns. But you look at him and he just looks the part. He looks the way that he looks like the way that a next level NFL wide receiver is supposed to look. He is very, very good. And Arizona would very much like to have him. Now, that's been something that has been on the Arizona radar for a while. If Badger was, we've been talking about it on the show, if Badger was to enter the portal, Arizona would be very much in the mix. He's got a very, very good relationship with Bobby Wade. And think about it this way, like we talked about, if you're looking to get into the NFL and you want basically this to be a one-stop pit stop before you get into the NFL, then Arizona is probably going to be the place that you're going to want to be, because you got a first-round draft pick, the best wide receiver in the country opposite you in Teteroa McMillan. And so it's not like you're going to be getting double teams. And you got a quarterback that can get you the ball. Now, with Noah Fafita, the one thing about him is that if you're open, Noah's going to make sure you get the ball. With Noah Fafita, everybody eats. That is a very, very enticing part of it. And he throws a catchable football that most players would love to play for or love to play with. So it makes a lot of sense. And Arizona very much wants him. Now, I've always thought, too, the wide receiver spot's a little bit different. Like, if you're a starting running back and you're bringing in another running back on campus, you really want him to be there? You really want to show him the ropes? I say no, because it's kind of like a quarterback spot. I don't want to bring somebody in trained to take my job from me. At the wide receiver spot, there's obviously 3 different players, and you rotate them a lot in and out. And it's not like Teteroa McMillan is going anywhere. And everybody else is kind of unproven. Montana Lamonius Craig played a lot last year, didn't put up a lot of stats. And then you've also got Malachi Riley, who I like a lot. I think he's got the second most potential on the team, but he hadn't really played a ton either. Now, he showed a lot when he was there. And then everybody else, obviously Kevin Green has moved on to Washington. And then you've also got A.J. Jones. Love A.J. Jones. We just got to be able to see what he can do on the field. But there is certainly a spot. And if Elijhah Badger were to – and then you've also got a kid from Old Dominion as well, caught for 500 yards, 3 touchdowns, et cetera, et cetera. But there's obviously a spot for Elijhah Badger, and there would be a spot for Elijhah Badger anywhere he goes. He's a 6'2" wide receiver that has NFL potential, and generally those guys, you don't just find them anywhere. And so Elijhah Badger is somebody that Arizona would very, very much like to have. Now, the visit went well. Listen, Arizona's going to be in this until the very end. Now, Arizona, there's some things that Arizona can't offer. They can't offer probably as much NIL as Florida or Texas A&M, schools like that. But Arizona's also been able to beat out other schools for certain players because of various, because of various connections or because of the opportunity to be able to be here. I mean, look at it this way. Noah Fafita and T-Mac could have made millions of dollars elsewhere. They just could have. And they decided not, they decided they were going to stay here and back the A. And for a variety of different reasons. I think Noah Fafita obviously is very loyal. T-Mac loyal as well. I mean, T-Mac by his own admission was like, yeah, I'm not leaving, man. I'm going to stay here. T-Mac obviously likes being at the University of Arizona. And Noah Fafita, I think, he obviously comes from a great family. And I think that he probably looks at it as I can carve out my own legacy here and I can be something, when I leave here, I can be revered as kind of a special player. And they're both very, very much on those trajectories. And, but, with T-Mac, he's going to be in the NFL in a year. The NFL draft coming up, he's going to be in there. And Elijhah Badger, I think, probably wants to be in there as well. So I don't know that if you're looking for a better fit, I don't know that you're going to find one in Arizona. Now, in years past, excuse me, in years past, I certainly wouldn't have said that, but you've got a very established quarterback that also throws a very catchable ball. And like we talked about before, with Noah Fafita, everybody eats. Last year, look at it, and it's very much that way as well, in that you obviously had T-Mac, but then you had Jacob Cowing, who caught for 900 yards, 13 touchdowns. And I don't see why Badger can't fit into that role, because Badger might have he's not as sudden as Jacob Cowing, that's for sure. But he also, I think, he's just got kind of a presence. He's got the ability to go up and get the ball. He's bigger. And he obviously has that relationship with Bobby Wade. We'll see how many more visits he takes. But I will say that if Elijhah Badger and T-Mac are your starting wide receivers, that is the best wide receiver duo in the entire country, and it is not even close. There's nobody else because, again, you got the best wide receiver, and then you got somebody in Elijhah Badger, who I think Elijhah Badger has top 100 potential in the NFL draft. Now, listen, he's dealing with a little bit of a back issue, and so there is that. You got to be able to get him all healthy. Same thing with T-Mac, but I would imagine both these guys would be fully ready to go by camp. So that's going to be something very interesting to see. Now, I would imagine a Badger decision sooner than later, because again, you want to be able to get on campus, but you want to be able to figure out everything, and honestly, you want to start getting paid as well. So, like I said, I would imagine that will come down, but I think Arizona feels good about where they are. Now, does that mean he's coming here? Not guaranteeing that at all, because anything can happen in this day and age. We've seen this many, many times, but Arizona's got a very good pitch for him. You look at some of the other schools, it's a little bit more dicey. Florida, you can make more money for sure, but you're also probably going to have a freshman quarterback there, and you're going to be in the SEC with a freshman quarterback throwing to you. Probably not the best way to get yourself a bunch of numbers. And then other places too, you look at a Texas A&M, you got a new coach, but are you worried about getting lost in the shuffle? All of that. Arizona gives you the spot where you have probably the most direct path to the NFL, and you probably have the roster that is most capable of taking advantage of you. So we will certainly keep you up to date on this one, but I wouldn't imagine that this decision will take long, because he's obviously a very good wide receiver. He's going to be on the market for, he can go pretty much anywhere he wants. So we will certainly keep you up to date on that one. But there's another big time player that Arizona is pursuing. Probably not as big a possibility, but certainly a possibility nonetheless. We will get to him next. But first, FanDuel. FanDuel.com/locked-on. Check it out. This is, again, basketball and college basketball, college football, the NFL, they are over. Boo. But listen, you still got the NBA playoffs going on, and there's nothing that is more enticing than watching the NBA playoffs, where you've got a little bit of cash in the game, a little bit of skrill. So again, check it out, FanDuel.com/locked-on. You will thank me later for this one. But again, makes things a lot more interesting. Like I always say, I hate baseball, but guess what? If I got a little bit of money in the game, I am going to watch baseball, and I'm going to make it more interesting. And that is thanks to FanDuel. Again, check it out, FanDuel.com/locked-on. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk Javion Cole. A player from San Jose State. Obviously, last year he played for Brent Brennan, originally out of Northern California. I don't know. Arizona definitely does not probably feel as comfortable about this situation as they do with Elijhah Badger, because you can kind of see where this recruitment is going. I mean, he's going to be visiting Texas. He's going to be looking at Michigan State. He's going to be looking at Auburn. He's going to be looking at all of the big boys, and this is probably a payment one. And if you're looking strictly for a payment, Arizona probably can't compete with those schools. Now, there certainly is a connection, and there is an opportunity for him. He was one of the better players on there. He was one of the better cornerbacks on the West Coast, regardless of a conference last year at San Jose State under Brent Brennan. So he obviously knows him. He knows the scheme. He knows that everything going on. And with Tacario Davis, you have an absolute stud at one of those cornerback positions. And Arizona desperately needs somebody else on the outside. So again, if you're looking for kind of a one-stop, a 1-year pit stop before you hopefully are in the NFL, then Arizona's a pretty enticing spot for you, because again, you got an NFL dude. Arizona's got a lot of NFL players on this roster. So you got to remember that, when Arizona's playing, you're going to have a lot of NFL scouts watching, which is kind of a departure from years past, decades past. So again, I don't like Jed Fish. Now he left, but you got to give Jed Fish credit on this one. He certainly improved the roster a ton. But Javion Cole opposite Tacario Davis would solve a lot of problems in the secondary. And I think all of a sudden, if that were to happen, you'd have one of the better secondaries in the entire country, because Tacario Davis is about as good as any DB there is in the country. But then you have Javion Cole opposite him. Both guys are obviously Tacario's got first round potential, and Javion Cole has NFL potential. And then you got Traden Stukes in the nickel, and then you got the three safeties in Genesis Smith, Dalton Johnson, and Gunnar Maldonado. That Arizona desperately needs a cornerback there. So I think the big thing is with him is, can you just get him on campus? Because again, this might be a highest bidder situation, but Arizona has shown that if they can get kids on campus, they've got a real chance. And I think they've got a real chance with him if that can happen. But you got to get him on campus first. But like I said, this is going to be a national recruitment of the highest order. And Arizona is going to it's like I said, Arizona's just got to get him on campus. But if you get him on campus, then if you're Dwayne Aquina, you can really sell him on something, because as we all know, Dwayne Aquina is one of maybe the best defensive backs coach in college football history. He is that good. You look at the players that he has coached, from Chris McAllister to Darrell Lewis to Michael Huff to Aaron Ross. You can just keep going and going and going and going. I think 3 Thorpe Award winners, something like 13 first-round picks. The dude knows what he's doing when it comes to this. Obviously, Tacario Davis agreed as well. But like I said, I would be a little surprised. Excuse me. Sorry, I've had something in my throat the whole time. But if I were, I would be a little bit surprised if Javion Cole ended up here. But you never say never when it comes to this day and age, and we'll certainly keep you in the loop on that one. Those are 2 huge targets that Arizona is looking at. Badger, you'll probably feel a little bit more comfortable on than Cole, but there's that. Now, wanted to talk about some of the additions that Arizona has that haven't hit here yet. And the first one I think we got to continue to talk about, we talked about him a little bit last week, though, is Kevon Darton. Coming in here out of Syracuse, this is one of the better D tackles in the portal. And I think a lot of times with deep tackles, you're banking on, was he really talented out of high school? What kind of ability does he have, et cetera, et cetera. With Kevon Darton, you don't have to bank on what he did. Pardon the pun. You don't have to bank on what he did in high school or what his ranking was or anything. He was an all-ACC caliber performer last year. He was one of the best interior linemen in the entire conference. 5 sacks, a bunch of tackles, quite a few tackles for loss. A little bit undersized, but he's probably going to fit in right next to another transfer we're going to talk about here in a second in Chuba May. But Darton, I don't know that we're talking about him quite enough. Very quick twitch, very quick off the snap. And a guy that's just, I think, like I said, just has a lot of potential to be able to be a really good player here and be a good player here immediately. And that's why they're bringing him in. I think you wish he could have been here for the fall, for the spring, but he'll be here for the fall. And he's obviously very familiar with some of the coaches on this staff. I would imagine that Arizona, especially too with Dwayne Aquina wants to have a more aggressive defensive line. He wants to be able to have guys that instead of just holding their gaps are looking to get up the field. And I think Darden fits in perfectly with that. And I think we're going to see that. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he was an all Pac-12 type dude. And then you got Chuba May next to him, guy from UC Davis, one of the largest people I've ever seen here. Obviously, I'm a big fan of BBN, Big Bill Norton, but Chuba May is drastically bigger than him. I'm not saying he's better. I have no clue, but he is a mammoth of a person. So both those dudes next to each other, you're probably going to take your chances to a certain degree. And then you got Trey Smith, the other defensive end, that's going to bring out your starting line. And again, I think the starting line is going to be pretty solid. Now, again, you got 3 transfers in there, but again, this is the new era of college football, and I think people need to realize that this is something where, and we're going to get to this at the end of the show, but this is the new era. This is where your roster isn't really set until August 1st, and that's kind of the way this team is. But that's kind of where you are. That's kind of where you are with some of the big time additions. Quali Conley at the running back spot. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he is your starting running back. I think he's going to split time with Pham. But I think, Conley, obviously, Brennan feels very comfortable with what he was, his background with him. And he should feel comfortable with his background with him because he's a good player. He rushed for almost 1,000 yards last year at San Jose State at 7 yards a pop. And he's not necessarily a power back, but he's big enough. He's elusive enough. There's a lot to like about the young man. And I think he's going to be very, very good for what Arizona wants to do. I would think that it wouldn't surprise me at all if he went for 1,000 yards as well. But Arizona obviously has to get him in the mix. And then you got Bear Anderson coming in from Memphis. The coaching staff loves him. He played quite a bit at Memphis this past year as a freshman. And I don't think that he's going to start, but I think he's going to be like Isaiah Johnson, where he is, he's in there, he's in the mix, and probably the following year he ends up being a starter. But you got to like a lot about what Bear Anderson can bring, and his film from Memphis is pretty solid as well. So those are some of the guys. Now Chase Kennedy from Utah, I have no clue what to expect. I'm not going to even sit here and try to venture a guess on what to expect. Kind of an undersized guy, but he is from Utah. Didn't really put up a lot of stats, but take that for what it's worth. And then you got the wide receiver Romello out of Old Dominion, who I would imagine is probably going to play. He has Les Fafita's stamp of approval, which means a lot. And I know it's Old Dominion, I get it, but he caught for 500 yards, 3 touchdowns last year as a freshman. And I think that Arizona is going to look to be able to put him in to as many situations as possible to get him out there and get him reps, get him out on the field. And we'll see exactly how that plays out. But Arizona's done well for itself. And, the biggest thing I think now is that you just need depth. Like you look at the offensive line, it's a little dicey, like we talked about. Michael Wooten, you're bringing in from Oregon. I think if you're Arizona, you're hoping that Michael Wooten can kind of give you a little bit of depth there that you haven't necessarily had in the past. But it's going to be, there's going to be a lot of tinkering that goes on. And that's something that we're going to talk about next. But first, Monopoly Go. All right. Now, a lot of people bring in Monopoly Go. Download the Monopoly Go free on App Store and Google Play. Monopoly Go is fantastic. You will like it. Trust me. Now, again, everybody has played Monopoly at some point in their life. And it's one of those games where you can get super, super frustrated, but it's also a good time. It's a good bonding experience with the family. And now you can do this virtually. There's a lot of different ways to go about doing it. But the first thing you got to do is download Monopoly Go free on the App Store and Google Play and go about getting a bunch of these different properties, all kinds of different things. But like I said, a lot of people are using it, and there's a reason, because it is fun. That's something you got to remember about a lot of these things that endorse here at Locked On, is that They do it because it's fun, because it works, and a lot of people like the stuff as well. So again, check it out, Monopoly Go. This is another one where you will thank me later. All right, now we got to talk about kind of the new things with the portal and what people need to really understand about that coming up next. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk a little bit about just kind of this new era we're in. Well, I think a lot of people are like, well, the portal's closing. What's Arizona going to be able to do? Until it's August 1st, you're just going to, you just got to kind of live with it. Until it's August 1st, that is really the way that it is. Now, and Arizona in the past has been able to get some good players. Look at Taylor Upshaw, for example, out of Colorado. He didn't go through spring with Arizona. He went through it at Colorado, decided he didn't want to be with Dion. And I don't really blame him because I think we're finding out that Dion might be self-imploding, but that's another story for another time. But Taylor Upshaw obviously liked his time at the U of A, and they had a spot for him. And guess what? He became Arizona's best pass rusher last year, 8 sacks, and he wasn't even on campus until the end. So again, with this is a new way. I think people now are like, well, what's exactly the deal with so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so? I'm just telling you, you can't really judge anything until August 1st. By August 1st, then you can. But this coaching staff also they know what they're doing. I think they know some of the thought process and whatnot about what people think about what's going on. And, like I said, just kind of give them a little bit of time here. I think that they've done a solid job of filling in some of these holes, but again, you got to continue to fill in some more, obviously, but I think they've done a pretty solid job of it. Now, you've obviously got, question marks like we talked about. You got to get more offensive linemen. You got to get another back in here. You'd love to get Elijhah Badger. You'd love to get another corner, another linebacker, another D lineman. But there's time. So again, just kind of go with the flow with it. Sometimes you just got to trust. And I think this is one of those opportunities where you got to trust. And so we'll continue to keep you all updated on this. But right now, I think that Arizona's got to feel pretty good about where, they are. This is a top 25 team. Now, it's not a top 5 team because, you've obviously got depth. You've got concerns at certain positions. And that's something that Arizona obviously has to address. But overall, don't think that, like I said, this coaching staff gets it. All right. Now, tomorrow, we're going to talk some Arizona basketball. We are going to been talking about this for a couple of days now, kind of the minutes, where everything stands with it. Because again, Arizona's got a nice little rotation, but we got to figure out exactly what the minutes are, who's going to be playing where. But more importantly, the spacing. Everybody now, the fad is talking about spacing, even though that is not as relevant to college basketball as it is in the NBA for a variety of reasons. But we're going to talk about the spacers and who could be a spacer for Arizona, who could not, and who could maybe improve upon their percentages a little bit, because I think a lot of people are kind of look at it and they're like, well, so-and-so can never get better at three-point shooting. We are going to talk about all of that. But as always, very, very much appreciate you all making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. Got a lot of transfer portal talk in. Tomorrow, we're going to talk U of A basketball, the spacers, and everything that goes with it. But you have a great rest of your day. And as always, thanks for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day.